Hi guys, so this will be a guide on how to change the oil and oil filter on the Lexus LS430. So the first thing I've done is ran the engine for a couple of minutes just to get the oil up to temperature. Not full heat, but you want it warmer. It'll just help it drain a little bit easier because it'll be a bit less viscous at a higher temperature. All you need is a 16mm socket. This will, or spanner, this will undo the oil drain plug. A 10mm socket or spanner to take the under tray off. And an oil filter removal tool, or similar, to get the oil filter off. And then the oil, you need around 5.5-ish litres of 5W30. There are other ones you can use. I've used just a Shell Helix Ultra. So what you want to do is jack the car up using, if you've got a big trolley jack like I have, you can use the centre jacking point, which is just behind the engine. If you don't have that and you only have a smaller jack, then just use the sills just behind the front tyre. But with these, you want to be careful not to bend the sort of pinch weld that is used to jack it up, so be careful doing that. I'd recommend using the centre jacking point. Just check your manual, and any of those, if you're in a different climate, you might need different viscosity of oil due to the different temperatures you deal with. So hopefully you can see there where the jack is placed. It's on this sort of horizontal bar just behind the oil pan, so you don't want to hit that oil pan. Do not jack it up with that, that'll obviously damage it. And you can see each side there's a little coloured sort of rubber hole. There's one either side, you can see it on that side, but there's one of those on each side. Jack it up in between those two, and then it should come up nice and easily. So now it's jacked up on the axle stands. You can see more clearly where the jack's been sitting. It's in between those two dots there. So when you do the axle stands, you can put them where you fancy. I've put mine under those bits there. I've had good where the lower wishbone connects. I've had no problems doing this, but it isn't a recommended jacking point, so it's up to you to put them where you want to put them. You can put them on the sills, but I found that mine are really rusty and I don't want to rip them apart, so that's where I put mine. Once you've got the car up and on the axle stands, I'll move the jack to the side if you've got it jacked on the centre cross member. It just makes life a bit easier to get to the oil drain plug, which is here. It's a 14mm, so you can use a socket or a spanner and just pop it off like that. So once it's loose, get something that catches all the oil that will come out of the oil pan. So I've got this sort of combined carrier and catch pan, which is quite useful. It's pretty cheap online, maybe £15. So once the drain plug is loose, just get the socket and the extension and undo it. You can do it by hand if you want as well. So you can see it's getting looser. Make sure you've placed your pan under, you don't want to miss the pan, and then it should come out fairly smooth. Now they say you should reuse the drain plug. I don't always do that, I've never had any issues, but that's a choice you need to make. Now, whilst we let this drain, the next step will be to take the under tray off. So there's the under tray, and you can basically see, the rusty on mine, probably rusty on yours as well. 10mm bolts that go around the shield. What I would do is go around and take all these off. Be careful not to remove the ones that are on the separate one here. You don't need to remove those because you're not taking this bit and tray off, it's just that main centre one. I would go around the outside and take them all off first, and then remove the middle ones, and this will then drop the under tray. I'm just going to use a 10mm with an impact wrench, which should speed things up. Just be careful when you remove them. Some bolts are longer than others, so try and remember where they go. There is a diagram online which will show you where each bolt goes, the long ones and the short ones. There's 2 different lengths. But to be honest, I forgot long ago, and I've not had any issues putting them back in, so I think they're sort of interchangeable-ish. So once you've undone all the bolts, you can see it just comes straight off. So there's 18 in total. You can see it's all where the rusty parts are. Pop all those 18 off. When you're doing it, obviously you're going to be underneath the car, so maybe wear some eye protection. Or just be very careful, because as you sort of shake around undoing bolts, rust and dirt and that can fall into your eyes. Had it a few times, not very pleasant. And once that's all off, you can see quite clearly the oil filter housing and oil filter. My oil is just about finished draining, so I'm going to put the plug back on, clean it up, and then move across my drain catcher to where the oil filter is, because obviously as we open this up now, we're going to lose a load of oil through that as well. To undo an oil filter, there are many different ways you can do it. You can do it with a big set of like pliers or similar. If you're lucky, you can stick a screwdriver in and twist it with a screwdriver. This sometimes works. This also sometimes wrecks the oil filter. I like these. They're pretty good. Got them from Halfords for like 10 quid. I'd probably invest in at least a tool to undo it, because if you're doing it any more than sort of once a year or so, it's going to be not worth the pain. So with these tools, all I do is grab like this. I grab as near the sort of threads as possible, really. Just bite down and give it a pull. This one's quite tight, but we got it there. That's loose now. I didn't do that very well because I was trying to film at the same time, but yeah, just bite it. There are many YouTube videos on how to get an oil filter off without an oil filter removal tool, but honestly, I find it's just not worth the pain, and you're better off investing in a removal tool. So I would do that. Now, this is the messy part. What you need to do is align the oil filter. You can see mine's already dripping. So, I don't know if I better get this in the camera very well. A wide angle. So, you've got the oil filter there. And all you're going to do is unscrew it whilst this all comes out. You can let it drain if you want. So partially undo it until it starts seeping oil, and let the oil drain out. You probably will get oil where you don't want it. It's very difficult to do without it, but just unscrew it and it should come off, and there comes all the oil. So I'll just clean up this oil filter and then stand it on its end, and it shouldn't leak. So once you've removed the oil filter, just check your new one's exactly the same as your old one. Mine's ordered from the same place and same brand, so it does look exactly the same. Yours might have different branding or whatever, but just check that basically the threads and the sort of patterns on top and the seal, especially the seal, is all identical, because if anything goes wrong with the oil, that's your engine toast. So just double check that. I don't usually fill these with oil before I put them on, just because it all comes out anyway. So yeah, I'm not going to bother. I've tried before, and I've done this many times. I've never had an engine blow up on me, but again, if you want to, then go for it. Put the oil filter back on. Just make sure it's all clean around the edges. You can see there, that's what it looks like. And then use a bit of oil just to basically lube the seal up. I will pour a little bit of oil in because I need some to do the seal anyway. Only a little bit. Run the oil around the seal. And then you only want to do it about hand tight. Obviously this depends how strong you are, but get it on like that. See all the oil that you've put in come out, and then tighten it. Like that. Don't ratchet down with the oil tightening, with the oil filter removal tool, because that'll be way too tight. It will then never come undone, or you'll damage the threads, or both, and that's not what you want. So once the oil filter is back on tight, just make sure that there's no leaks from the oil filter or from the drain plug, and then you should put maybe a litre of oil in. That's what I've done, just to make sure that it's not dripping out. Then we can start working backwards, which will be putting the under tray back on, which with the 18 10mm bolts, and then we're going to drop the car, because it's going to be, as long as it's level, that means that when you're filling the oil back up, you can make sure you're aware how much oil you're putting in, because overfilling is a pain. You don't want to do that. You then have to take the whole car, do this again, lift it up and drain a bit out. So just make sure when you're filling it nice and slowly and checking regularly. But we'll cover that in a minute. So we'll get the under tray for now and bolt it back on with these 18 bolts. You can see with the under tray there's sort of a fluffy padded part. This bit goes up, and it's the narrow part of the back and the wider part of the front. So it sort of goes in like that. So to put the bolts back on, I find it's usually easiest to use just an extension with a 10mm and just do it by hand like that, because otherwise you're going to be over tightening or getting stuck. So what you want is this bit here at the front to be under the bonnet, so it doesn't get caught in the wind. Just like that. So you can see it's kind of under. So this is from the front view. I've put the centre bolt in first here, and this has held this under tray up, and then you can put the extra bolts in. And I would just do it hand tight, because they're only plastic that it's screwing into anyway, so you don't want to snap anything. And you might find that some of them just keep turning forever, so just stop as long as the bolt's in there. It doesn't really matter. So as I was tightening mine, quite a lot of them started spinning and didn't tighten properly, so I would just be careful when you tighten them. Really don't do it too tight at all. So after that's all done, we're just going to take the car off the axle stands and put it down flat on the ground. Now this car's got air suspension, so I'm going to let it down quite gently as well. I don't think it would appreciate having all its weight crash down on its air suspension. I have a feeling it would go bang. So just catch it just as the wheels touch the floor and lower it nice and slowly. So to fill the oil, I like to just pop the dipstick and take the engine oil cap off. Now I've got a funnel. I would advise using a funnel because getting oil all over the engine is never a great idea. Use the capacity of the engine, which is, my manual says 5.6 litres of oil. The American website says 5 quarts. Don't know what that is because I'm English, but put in a bit less than what the manual says. Check the dipstick, and then just go at slow increments until you see it on the dipstick, and you want it just below full, I'd say. Hopefully I'll do a demonstration now on how to pour a full bottle of oil without spilling it, but probably not. So have the spout at the top, and it will let the air escape. If you have the spout at the bottom, you get this weird glug 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 like that. So just have this spout at the top, and it makes life a lot easier. So I think I put in about 4-ish and a bit litres. We're nearly there. Can we see it? Yes, we can. So we want a little bit more. And we are exactly where we need to be. A couple of millimetres from the top. Now, there probably isn't very much oil in the oil filter, if any. So what I'm going to do, start the car just for a minute or so, and running that will push the oil through the engine and give us a more accurate reading. So I ran the engine for a few minutes and just going to check the oil now. Yep, so as you can see, we have now dropped well below, I don't know if you can see it or not really, to be honest, but we've dropped well below the maximum, so we can put a little bit more in. That's just where the oil has basically moved itself to the oil filter. Yeah, I will put a little bit more in. Now you can see actually, if I look on the other side, it's kind of smudged the whole way. Can't really see that at all. So if we look on this side, you can see the oil is kind of smudged its way up here. Whereas if you flip it over, you can see a nice clear line where the oil is. With the Lexus LS430, it seems like the sort of the oil stick, the dipstick, gets smudged on one side. So check both sides of the dipstick when you're seeing how much to put in, because if you check one side, you might panic and think, well, we've overfilled it, but actually it's just where the oil sort of smudges itself up over one side of the dipstick. So just bear that in mind. When you start the car for the first time after you change the oil, or drive, let the car warm up for the first time after you change the oil, you might get an oil burn smell. That's probably where you've leaked oil. Not from the car, not from the engine, but just dropping oil in places it shouldn't be. So if you spill any oil, or just any oil gets anywhere basically, especially on the exhaust manifold or anywhere that gets hot, you will get an oil burn smell. As long as that goes away within the first sort of couple of miles or so, you should be okay. If it persists, obviously check for any oil leaks. I would also advise, once you've changed the oil, drive the first sort of 30 miles or so, whatever you want really, and check the oil again. It should go down a little bit maybe, but if it goes down a lot, obviously you've got a leak, so you should check underneath and see if there's any oil dripping. Another way to do it is just to put a bit of cardboard under the car, or paper or whatever, especially if it's not windy, and you can just see where the car's leaking any oil. It'll just land on the paper and it'll be very obvious.